story of another princess. She was a very independent princess. She was beautiful, she was strong, she was smart, she ruled well. But her advisors were very concerned that she wasn't married. The head advisor came to her and said, "Your Majesty, we know you're not interested in getting married right now, but it's written in our laws that you have to come up with a test in order for anyone who can try to become your husband." She didn't hit him. She looked at him instead and said, "All right, I decree," and he said, "Now wait a minute, the one thing you can't say is that you're never going to get married. You have to come up with a test." "Oh," she said. "All right, let me think about it." And the next day, she decreed before everyone in her land that she would marry the man who could give her a blue rose. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but roses don't come in blue. And so she thought she was pretty clever. She continued to rule well, beautifully, strong, smart. But there was always someone coming to the door, asking to be allowed to give a blue rose to the princess. Usually, when people asked what their plan was, they didn't have one. But there came a warrior to the court, and he said, "I have a plan to get a blue rose for the princess. I need an army." "Very well," said the advisors. They gave him an army. He invaded the kingdom next door. They were very well known for having beautiful jewels, and he stole their biggest sapphire and took their most clever jewelry, and he forced him to carve a blue rose out of that sapphire. He came to the princess and presented it to her at court. "Your Majesty, will you marry me?" he said. She took the sapphire rose, but what she saw was a warrior who would take anything he wanted by force. And she said, "This is not a blue rose. This is jewelry. I have jewelry enough. A princess's word is law, and I say this is not a blue rose." And so the warrior was taken away. Well, the next suitor that thought he had an idea of how he could get the princess to marry him was an artist. He worked in ceramics. He gathered together a team and said, "I wish to marry the princess, and all I need is the finest clay, the most beautiful paints, and a studio to work in." And so he was given those things. He and the rest of his team worked day and night, and they made the most beautiful vase. And on it, he painted the most realistic-looking blue rose. And then he gave it to the princess. "Your Majesty, will you marry me?" The princess took the vase. She liked the artist, but what she saw was a man who would never be distracted from his own artwork. "It is a beautiful vase," she said, "and when I get a blue rose, I will put it inside. But a princess' word is law, and this is not a blue rose." And so the artist was taken away. A few years passed before the next one came to ask the princess to marry him. He was a scholar. He said that all he needed was lots and lots of books from the library and a quiet, dark place where he could work experiments. After about a month of experimenting, he took a rose and dipped it in blue dye. He was very proud of himself. He walked into the court and said, "Princess, you will marry me?" And she took the blue rose. But what she saw was a man who was deceitful, who would do anything seemed to get what he wanted and would lie about it all the same. But she wasn't quite sure how to refuse an actual blue rose. Fortunately for her, a butterfly flew in just at that moment and landed on the rose. Poor butterfly, it died. "Poison," she said. "This man was trying to woo me with poison. I will not accept this as a blue rose. It is dangerous, and a princess' word is law." And so the smoke was taken away. The princess continued to rule her kingdom wisely and well, but she was getting a little lonely. She worked in her garden every night, and she could hear someone playing music over the wall. One night, she was listening, and that person began to sing. Am I blue? Am I blue? These tears in my eyes telling you. Well, it was such a sad song. It was matching the princess' mood exactly. So she joined in. Am I blue? You'd be too. Each plan with your man just fell through. Well, by the time they had finished singing their duet, they were looking over at each other, over the garden wall. And there was a shepherd. "Hello, princess," he said. "Is it you who's been playing the music every night when I come into the garden?" "Yes," he said. "Well, maybe you should come on over here," said the princess. "I'd like that," he said. And so began a beautiful friendship where the shepherd would play music and the princess would garden. And this went on for quite some time until at last they decided they'd better get married. "How is that possible?" said the shepherd. "A princess' word is law, and you said you would only marry a man who could give you a blue rose. How am I supposed to do that?" "Leave it to me," she said. "You bring me that rose there to my court tomorrow night, and all will be well." "Okay," said the shepherd, and he plucked the rose that was a pure white and brought it to the court the next day. He was dressed in his very best, but he was pretty nervous when he got to court. There were a lot of very wealthy nobles on either side of him, and right to the right of the princess was the head of her advisors. But he came up close to the throne and said, "Princess, will you marry me?" And handed out the white rose. "Well, look," said the princess, "a blue rose." Everyone started to murmur. What did she mean, a blue rose? She took the rose and put it behind her ear and said, "A princess' word is law, and I say this is a blue rose." Well, they were married right away, because the kingdom wanted the princess to be married, and the princess and the shepherd wanted very much to get married, and the advisors were smart enough to see that. From then on, the law was written a little bit differently to say that the princess may marry whomever she chooses. Nice of you to join me in Aunt Leanne's Story Garden. Anybody who would like to take some of the dragons forward, please feel free. There's quite a lot. Did you get a nice hand? Good. All right.